Today, we're kicking off with a story that really shows how the most detailed, almost painstaking technical work can just explode onto the world stage.
It's a perfect example, isn't it?
Yeah,
The kind of work that most of us would just scroll right past.
exactly. And this story, it ends up redefining international politics and, well, a global human rights crisis.
It's the story of how the functional specs of a piece of technology became the blueprint for a massive campaign of repression.
That's a powerful way to put it. The blueprint.
Yeah, because we always hear that technology is sort of value neutral. It's just a tool.
Hmm.
But our deep dive today is going to show that the architecture itself, the way it's designed, can be weaponized from the very beginning.
So that's our mission today. We're going to trace that journey from a super obscure technical manual all the way to the human rights tragedy unfolding in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, or the XUAR.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's set the scene because the initial hook here is fantastic. It's 2018. And you have this guy, John Hanovich. He's the founder of a small, very specialized trade publication. It's focused entirely on video surveillance tech.
Niche, to say the least.
Extremely niche. He's not a human rights activist. He's not a government agent. He's a gearhead,
Yeah.
a researcher who is obsessed with the details of security equipment.
And he's on his laptop, just methodically digging through a website for a conference happening halfway across the world.
The Hikvision AI Cloud World Summit.
In Hangzhou, yeah. And we need to be clear, Hikvision is a giant. They are the world's largest security camera manufacturer. So Hanovich's goal is actually pretty simple.
He just wanted to know what their new stuff could do.
That's it. What are the capabilities of the latest generation of Hikvision tech?
And we're talking about poring over the most tedious material you can imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dense technical manuals, API documentation,
Application programming interfaces, yeah.
product spec sheets. It is the definition of diligent, unglamorous work that, most journalists and certainly most consumers would just ignore.
But that's where he found it. By sifting through those product descriptions, the code functionalities, him and his team found these sinister details just hidden in plain sight.
They found specs that basically confirmed this security equipment was specifically designed for ethnic profiling, for political surveillance.
So that technical analysis, the stuff from the manuals, it became this unintended blueprint. It confirmed exactly how the Chinese government planned to deploy this vast integrated surveillance system against the Uyghur population in Xinjiang.
And that's the power of this discovery. It's not that we're only relying on survivor testimony, though that human experience is absolutely central.
Of course.
We're pairing it with the source evidence from the technology itself. So for this deep dive, we're integrating a huge compilation of human rights reports, leaked government documents, news coverage, and critical academic works that detail this systematic campaign.
A campaign targeting Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Turkic minorities.
Our deep dive will trace that line from the tiniest technical specification in a manual to the massive global political and economic fallout, mass detention, forced labor, and an information war waged to hide it all.
Let's start at the foundation then. The digital architecture of repression.
Okay.
Because a system like this level of repression, it can't happen without some serious tech. We're talking about bleeding-edge AI, advanced biometrics.
And it requires coordination from massive international tech companies.
So let's name them. The sources repeatedly cite a few major Chinese surveillance manufacturers: Hikvision, Dahua, Huawei, and SenseTime.
And these are not niche players. These are global giants shaping the future of security technology for the entire world.
And Hikvision, as you said, is at the top of the list.
They lead the pack, and the controversy around them is immense precisely because of that global reach. I mean, sources show that as far back as October 2021, they were already facing intense scrutiny in Europe over their data practices.
And they had to admit there was a pretty big vulnerability in their cameras, right?
A significant one, yes, which points to ongoing systemic issues with their products and their internal processes.
But the really damning stuff, the thing that ties their products directly to the repression in Xinjiang, came later. It circles right back to Hanovich's original digging.
Right. In April 2023, an exclusive report came out. It revealed that an internal Hikvision review, their own review, had found contracts specifically targeting Uyghurs in Xinjiang.
So this wasn't an accident. It wasn't their tech being used in a way they didn't intend.
No, it was a targeted business strategy. The internal documents showed explicit deals designed to support government security initiatives right there in the XUAR.
And a company attorney eventually had to admit it.
had to admit that these contracts, these highly sensitive targeted contracts, did in fact exist. That disclosure just moved the whole issue from an abstract ethical concern to documented complicity.
And you can see how important this market is to them by how they react. They're constantly issuing denials, trying to do crisis management.
Well, yeah. In April 2023, they had to formally deny leaked claims from the Pentagon, suggesting their equipment could be used for espionage against the U.S.
But as long as the technical specifications confirm what they're doing domestically, those denials about international spying, they just ring a bit hollow, don't they?
They do. And this brings us right back to the power of that technical trail. Because while Hikvision dominates the hardware, its competitor, Dahua, really illustrates the sinister functionality of the software.
Okay, so what did the sources say about Dahua?
The report said Dahua allegedly deployed technology explicitly capable of detecting ethnic minorities.
Okay, wait. I want to stop on that for a second. How does a camera detect an ethnic minority? What's the mechanism there? This is way beyond just, facial recognition or reading a license plate.
That is the critical difference. Standard security AI looks for an activity, a break-in, a car speeding.
Something you do.
Exactly. This generation of AI surveillance moves into identity-based policing. The software is trained on these massive data sets of facial features, clothing, physical characteristics, even how a person walks.
Their gait.
Their gait, yeah. All associated with specific ethnic groups. Sure. In this case, Uyghurs. The source's detailed functionality, including race detection, and it offered real-time Uyghur warnings as far back as February 2021.
So the system flags a person not because of an illegal act, but because of who they are.
Precisely. The surveillance becomes active, it's identity-based, and it is inherently discriminatory. It's a profound technical leap. It turns the entire population into a constant target. You don't have to do anything suspicious to trigger an alert other than just exist in a certain place.
The technical specs become the mechanism for segregation.
And eventually for arbitrary detention.
And this whole technological net, it's not just cameras, is it? It's an integrated ecosystem.
It has to be, which is where a company like Huawei comes in, a massive name in global telecoms, and they were also directly implicated.
What was the evidence there?
A huge 3,000-page briefing was exposed in December 2021. It provided source evidence detailing Huawei's extensive role in the Chinese government's surveillance program.
So they're providing the backbone for all of this.
The networking, the data storage, the foundational systems that allow all those camera feeds and biometric data to be collected, analyzed, and integrated across the entire region.
The sources, especially the personal testimonies, they paint a pretty bleak picture of what it's like to live under this.
People who escaped talked about cameras everywhere. I mean, that phrase comes up again and again. It shows just how pervasive this surveillance machine is. You can't move, you can't gather, you can't live a normal life without being mapped, tracked, and analyzed.
The real goal of all this tech, as I understand it, is something called predictive policing.
And that is the truly terrifying core of the system. The surveillance is designed to collect millions of what they call micro-clues on the population.
Micro-clues, like what?
Where you shop, who you talk to, how often you pray, what you buy, your movement patterns outside of your designated home zone.
And what does the system do with all that data?
The AI analyzes it all to generate a risk score for every individual. If your score hits a certain threshold, maybe you travel too far from home, have too many religious apps on your phone, or even something as simple as not charging your phone often enough, the system flags you.
It flags you as what?
An unstable element, a potential extremist. And this is before you've committed any crime. The police are then dispatched based on the system's prediction.
So the tech itself enables this systemic administrative repression. It turns every Uyghur into a potential suspect based on an algorithm.
An algorithm derived from their ethnic and cultural life.
Exactly. And when the international community tries to stop the flow of this tech,
the system adapts. The sources note that China found ways to get around U.S. biometrics bans in the region. Well, when the U.S. blocked the sale of certain sophisticated facial recognition tools, Chinese firms just pivoted. They shifted to other forms of biometric tracking. Maybe it's voice analysis, DNA sequencing, advanced gait analysis. If one technological door closes, another biometric one opens. The tracking continues.
And the result of this massive tech buildup is, well, you can see it physically in the actual infrastructure of detention.
Yes, that's a powerful and chilling indicator. The physical infrastructure literally grew to meet the demands of the digital repression. Sources from October 2021 noted that one pretrial detention center in Xinjiang doubled its capacity between 2018 and 2019.
And that was typical.
Just like many others, this rapid, massive expansion directly correlates with the widespread deployment of the technology we're talking about. The tech identifies and segregates the population, and the prisons are built to hold them.
So the tech creates the net. It identifies these unstable elements through predictive policing. But what actually pulls people into that net? What kind of behavior are we talking about?
This is where we get to the profound human cost, the criminalization of an entire identity.
Let's start with the scope of this detention system, because the numbers they're hard to comprehend.
They're horrific. Estimates suggest these camps have housed up to 1.8 million Uyghurs and other Muslims since 2017.
An astronomical number.
And critically, reports from September 2020 confirm that China is still building new detention centers. And the new ones are getting bigger. This is not a program that's winding down. It's expanding.
And the proof of this, the thing that confirms the scope and the direct state involvement, comes from the leaks, the documents that got out.
The leaked evidence is crucial. It's irrefutable proof from inside the system. You have the Xinjiang police files, which came out in May 2022. Thousands of raw documents, photos of detainees, internal speeches.
All showing the direct roles of top leaders.
Exactly. Then you have the Xinjiang papers from back in November 2019 and the Kirkwash list.
Tell me about the Kirkwash list. Why was that so important for refuting the official narrative?
The Kirkwash list was vital. The Chinese government's line was always that the camps were about combating religious extremism or terrorism.
Right, the counterterrorism angle.
But the Kirkwash list was a leaked spreadsheet. It detailed the specific reasons why individuals were interned. And it just debunked those claims completely. It showed people were being detained for entirely normal, non-violent acts of cultural expression.
Which brings us to this shocking idea of criminalizing identity. Secret documents from February 2020 confirmed people were interned for what officials called mundane behavior.
That phrase, mundane behavior, is key. The criteria for detention were just chillingly arbitrary. They targeted the most basic markers of Uyghur identity and religious practice.
What kind of examples were cited?
Things like wearing a hijab, having thick beards, visiting a foreign website maybe to read news the state didn't approve of, or even just applying for a passport.
These aren't acts of extremism.
Not at all. They're markers of personal freedom, of cultural identity, that the state system decided were precursors to instability.
And this administrative logic leads to these devastatingly long prison sentences. I think we need to linger on some of the specific examples just to understand the human impact.
Absolutely. The sources provide some profoundly heartbreaking details. There's the case of an ethnic Kazakh man secretly sentenced to 23 years in prison.
23 years? For what?
His charge was reading the Quran. This happened after he was put in a re-education camp and failed to cooperate with the forced assimilation curriculum.
So not complying with the destruction of his own culture led to 2 decades in prison.
Exactly. It's the criminalization of thought itself. And it goes further. It even reaches back into the past.
How so?
Another case involved a Uyghur woman sentenced to 17 years in prison. Her crime, praying at her father's funeral. And that funeral took place back in 2013.
So years earlier, they're retroactively punishing people for things that weren't even criminal at the time.
Precisely. And the cruelty spans generations. Sources also document cases of elderly victims, people over 70, serving long prison terms for things like learning scripture decades ago, sometimes as far back as the 1950s.
It's designed not just for present control, but for the retroactive erasure of cultural memory.
It's hard to see it any other way. It's a campaign designed to wipe out the very foundation of Uyghur life, which takes us directly to the aggressive push for cultural assimilation and erasure.
This is what many sources call a cultural genocide.
And the destruction isn't just digital, it's physical. Reports detail the wholesale destruction of mosques and religious sanctuaries. Entire Uyghur neighborhoods in historic cities like Yarkand have just been demolished.
Wiped off the map.
Physically erasing the landscape of their heritage to make way for, Han Chinese-style development.
And this erasure extends to language, to intellectual life, the very fabric of identity.
Correct. Yeah. And the sources show this is part of a broader policy. For instance, China ordered Mongolian medium schools to switch entirely to Mandarin by September 2023. The official reason was to impose national unity.
And in Xinjiang, it's even more repressive.
Much more. Uyghur students are reportedly penalized just for speaking their native language on campus. Children are said to be so fearful that they avoid even using their traditional Uyghur names in front of teachers.
And then there's the attack on the intellectual and cultural leadership. Observers have a name for this, right?
They call it eliticide.
Eliticide.
It captures the systematic nature of the targeting, the disappearance, the detention, the persecution of over 312 documented Uyghur intellectuals, cultural elites, poets, scholars. It's seen as a critical component of the campaign. The state is neutralizing the custodians of Uyghur history and culture.
Can you give us some of the names cited in the sources? The loss of these people is a cultural catastrophe.
The list is tragic. It includes the poet Kulnisa Emin, a symbol of the modern Uyghur literary movement. Most famously, perhaps, is Rahil Dawat, a globally recognized anthropologist who specialized in Uyghur folklore. She's been missing since 2017.
And university leaders, too.
Yes, Tash Polatip, the former president of Xinjiang University. These people represent the absolute pinnacle of Uyghur intellectual life.
Why target the cultural elite so aggressively? Why not just political dissidents?
It's a strategic weapon. It's designed to destroy cultural identity at its roots. If you silence the historians, the poets, the professors, you decapitate the group's ability to preserve its own memory, to pass down its traditions, to tell its own stories.
It ensures that future generations will only have a diminished, state-controlled version of their own heritage.
Which makes forced assimilation that much easier. The evidence strongly suggests an intent to destroy the group's cultural identity in its entirety.
This repression is not a contained domestic issue. Because of systematic forced labor, this crisis flows directly into the global supply chain. This means consumers all over the world, including you, the listener, could be unknowingly implicated.
This is the dimension that forces that confrontation between human rights, corporate profit, and international law. And the sources confirm this exploitation is systematic. It's often facilitated by these massive state-owned structures that just blur the line between civilian commerce and state control.
Let's focus on one of the main actors the sources mention, the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, or XPCC. We should be clear about what this is. It's not just a regular company.
Not at all. The XPCC is a unique and, frankly, chilling entity. You have to understand it as a paramilitary corporate conglomerate.
A paramilitary corporate conglomerate, that sounds like a contradiction.
It's highly deliberate. It's a state-owned enterprise that sources describe as being involved in egregious rights violations. It was designed explicitly for the suppression and colonization of the indigenous people of the Uyghur region.
So it's both a business and an arm of the state's security apparatus.
Exactly. It operates as a massive, self-contained economic entity, controlling huge swaths of land, resources, industries, from farming to construction. But it also maintains a military structure, which gives it both commercial power and coercive state authority. It anchors the entire forced labor system.
So it's almost impossible for foreign companies to operate in the region without dealing with an entity involved in these abuses.
It makes it nearly impossible. It ensures forced labor isn't some rogue incident, but a core, state-supported economic model.
And this system is now linked to several high-risk sectors that touch almost every aspect of our modern lives. Let's start with energy.
Okay, look at the solar energy industry. The supply chain for solar panels is incredibly dependent on raw materials and manufacturing processed in the XUAR.
And the key fact here is staggering.
It is. China accounts for an astonishing 97% of the global output for solar wafers. The link to forced labor in the production of polysilicon is a known risk, and it creates this immense ethical challenge for countries trying to transition to green energy.
So the green energy transition is running headlong into forced labor.
Precisely. And next, you have fast fashion and retail. This is where the consumer interacts most directly with the problem.
We've seen some big international brands face scrutiny here.
Yes. Companies like Zara, Uniqlo, Skechers, Shine, they've all faced public inquiry or formal warnings over suspected ties to forced labor in their supply chains.
And there's a cynical element to this too, right? With how goods are moved around.
There is. Sources reveal that shipments denied entry at U.S. ports because of U.S. law could then just be dumped into markets in Canada and Mexico. It's not solving the problem, it's just rerouting the tainted goods.
And finally, let's go back to electronics. We talked about the surveillance hardware, but the components are also implicated.
This shows just how deeply integrated this is. One report detailed a U.S. electronics firm that struck a deal to transport and hire Uyghur workers, sometimes under police escort.
A clear sign of coercion.
A very clear sign. And so, components potentially made with forced labor in the region may be found in products from major companies like Sony, Samsung, and LG US. The very devices we use every day could contain elements tainted by this exploitation.
Given this systematic exploitation, there had to be an international legislative response. What have the major economies done?
The U.S. took a major step with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the UFLPA. This law is foundational because it reverses the burden of proof.
What does that mean in practice?
It operates under a rebuttable presumption. It prohibits the import of any goods made, in whole or in part, in Xinjiang, unless the importer can prove, with clear and convincing evidence, that forced labor was not used.
So it makes due diligence a legal requirement, not just an ethical suggestion.
Exactly. And Europe is moving in that direction as well.
They're trying to catch up.
They are. The EU proposed a regulation to prohibit products made with forced labor from entering their market. And Germany enacted its own Supply Chain Act, which requires companies to ensure due diligence against human rights abuses. It signals a global trend away from voluntary codes toward mandated responsibility.
But even with these laws, the financial markets themselves are often slow to react, especially in areas that are supposed to be ethically sound, which brings us to ESG and SRI funds.
Right, and we should define those terms. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. SRI is socially responsible investing.
These are investment funds marketed to people who want their money to support ethical companies.
They're supposed to be clean, but the sources reveal a really troubling exposure.
What did they find?
It's genuinely shocking. Research from December 2022 found that at least 40 European-listed equity ETFs, including funds marketed as ESG or SRI from huge firms like BlackRock and Vanguard, were exposed to companies flagged for involvement in constructing the camps or using forced labor.
How does that even happen in funds that are specifically designed to be ethical?
It just highlights the sheer complexity and opacity of modern supply chains. These funds often invest in large index trackers or use passive strategies, which means even a small hidden link to a Chinese company involved in these operations can contaminate the entire portfolio.
So it reveals a massive gap between the ethical marketing and the reality on the ground.
A huge gap. And it's frustrating for investors who thought they were making a responsible choice.
Okay, so the weight of all this evidence, the tech, the human rights reports, it's provoked significant global condemnation and legal action. But every single action has been met with an equally determined and sophisticated propaganda counteroffensive.
That's right. And the official findings have been powerful. In August 2022, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights issued an assessment detailing grave human rights concerns in Xinjiang.
And then there was the Independent China Tribunal,
which in December 2021 concluded that China is guilty of genocide against the Uyghurs. Now, that's a non-governmental finding, but it carries immense moral and political weight.
And these findings have fueled legal action in countries outside of China.
Yes. Formal complaints alleging Uyghur genocide have been filed at the ICC, citing the leaked documents like the China cables as evidence. Lawyers are also pursuing universal jurisdiction, which allows serious international crimes to be prosecuted anywhere. Efforts like that were launched in Argentina in April 2023.
And the political condemnation from Western alliances has been pretty widespread.
Oh, absolutely. The G7 condemned China over the abuses back in June 2021. That same month, the Czech Senate took an even stronger stance and declared that China was perpetrating genocide. The diplomatic pressure is undeniable.
It's also spilled over into culture and corporate image, hasn't it?
A huge example was Disney. They faced intense backlash in September 2020 after thanking Xinjiang authorities in the credits of the movie Mulan.
A massive PR crisis for them.
It showed that even subtle acknowledgments of cooperation with local authorities could blow up. And you see countries like Japan exploring U.S.-style laws to sanction those responsible for abuses.
But the moment condemnation rises, China activates its counteroffensive. And this is a full-scale information war.
It's systematic. It employs multiple layers. One key tactic is promoting the narrative of the new Uyghurs.
What does that term, new Uyghurs, actually mean?
It refers to individuals who have been re-educated, meaning they've adopted Mandarin, renounced overt signs of their religion, and removed the cultural markers that Beijing finds, distasteful. By showcasing these people, the government tries to suggest the assimilation is voluntary and successful.
And they manage access for foreign media to make sure that's the only story that gets out.
They do. They organize these highly curated, supervised trips for foreign media. Reporters are taken to pre-approved sites, brightly decorated cultural centers, heavily monitored factories, preventing any genuine unsupervised access.
I also saw that they commission their own research to undermine external investigations. It sounds like manufacturing counter-evidence.
It's exactly that. They'll have so-called Uyghur researchers conduct fieldwork designed to refute Western findings of forced labor. And the predictable conclusion is always that they found only bright smiles and no evidence of forced labor. It's a tactic to use privileged access to undermine real journalism.
And beyond official media, they use coordinated disinformation online.
Campaigns like #StopXinjiangRumors use decentralized disinformation to spread doubt and attack critics. And the social media platforms have been criticized for their role here. Facebook was called out in June 2021 for allowing China's state-backed propaganda to operate freely.
And for actively sanitizing content.
Yes, that's a huge problem. Sources revealed that TikTok, a massively influential platform, was found to have sanitized the Xinjiang hashtag. It was deliberately cleansing the feed of content related to the humanitarian crisis. That's a central part of the information war.
Finally, we have to look at the deeply polarized response from the international community, especially within the Muslim world. That complicates things, doesn't it?
It's a critical element of China's strategy. While many Western governments condemn the actions as genocide, some countries in the Muslim world, either due to economic reliance on China or political alignment, have either supported Chinese policy or denied the atrocities are even happening.
Can you give some examples of that?
Sources noted that officials like Pakistan's prime minister have expressed support for China's policies. So have some Indonesian Islamic organizations. They often just repeat Beijing's talking points about counterterrorism. This lack of unified condemnation allows China to claim the criticism is just a Western plot.
Which stands in stark contrast to the actions of other Muslim nations.
Exactly. You have Kuwaiti members of parliament publicly urging their government to help the Uyghurs. Malaysia has taken a firm stance against deporting Uyghur refugees back to China, even at the risk of angering Beijing. So it shows just how complex the geopolitical pressures are and how difficult it is to forge a truly global consensus on accountability.
So we began this deep dive with John Hanovich, a researcher for a tiny independent publication, methodically clicking through links, poring over these incredibly obscure technical specs for Hikvision surveillance gear.
And that seemingly mundane, highly technical work became the foundation for exposing a global scandal of mass repression.
The technical specs weren't just about megapixels or storage.
No, they were the functional blueprint of systematic ethnic profiling, detention, and cultural control.
The journey from that tiny blog to the halls of the G7 and the EU Parliament, it proves a crucial point, doesn't it? Accountability often starts not with some grand diplomatic move, but with these persistent, small acts of investigation.
The meticulous work of analyzing tech specs ignited an international tech war. It forced a global reckoning on corporate responsibility.
So what's the key takeaway for you, the listener?
The evidence confirms that high-tech surveillance, forced labor, and mass detention are now deeply integrated into global commerce, into the technology we all rely on. So if we found ethnic minority detection hidden in the manuals for security cameras, we have to ask ourselves a question.
What's that?
What other discriminatory or repressive algorithms are operating right now, in silent, sinister details, within the software updates, the loan algorithms, the job screening tools, and the user agreements of the ubiquitous technology we use every single day?
The technical blueprint for the next crisis may already be in the fine print.
It may already be there.
A truly chilling and essential question to reflect on. Thank you for diving deep with us.